It's April 28th, 1996, a quiet Sunday morning in the sleepy town of Port Arthur in Tasmania, when a little after 12:30, so just after lunch, a married couple from Victoria, Maureen and John Mason, are driving down the Arthur Highway. To their left is a large pink-coloured property overlooking the water, and the signage makes it very clear that this is a bed and breakfast. In fact, it's called the Seascape. The locals would refer to this place as the Pink Palace. So they pull into the long winding driveway and they drive all the way down to the bottom and up to the house. They pull up to a yellow Volvo with a surfboard on the roof racks. Now this car is parked directly in front of the entrance. The driver's side door is wide open and there doesn't appear to be anyone inside. So the couple get out of their car and they start walking up to the front door of this giant pink house. But before they can get there, this tall, blonde, surfy looking guy walks out and is startled by them being there. For a moment, everybody jumped. But John composed himself enough to ask him if the property owner was around because they might be interested in renting a room. But this blonde guy who just walked out, he shrugs them off. He rudely tells them that his parents aren't in the house at this time. So John, now assuming that this guy works there, he asks, well, do you mind if we have a quick look around? To which the guy sort of rudely and angrily replies, no, my girlfriend's asleep. You can't go inside the house. Now the Masons couldn't help but notice his somewhat odd behavior. Like, he had very jerky movements and he appeared to be very agitated. Even his voice suggested that there might be something wrong. So Maureen, I guess having the ick, says to John, come on, let's just get out of here, because she can sense something's wrong. So the couple get in their car and they drive off. But what they didn't know is just how lucky they were, because over the next few hours, 35 people would be murdered, and the very house they were standing at would be burnt to the ground. Martin John Bryant was born the 7th of May 1967 to parents Maurice and Carleen Bryant. Martin would spend most of his time between the family's Lanier Valley home in Hobart and their beach house in Carnarvon Bay, which is almost an hour-and-a-half drive south, a suburb adjacent to the Port Arthur historical site, which becomes more important as the story goes along. By age 5, Martin would start primary school and attend the Friends School in Hobart. But little Martin didn't last long. His bad behaviour was too much for the teachers to deal with. He would torment younger children, he would constantly disrupt the class, he appeared to revel in hurting other children. So the school tells the Bryants that Martin has to attend another school. They kick him out. His parents would take him to a children's clinic where a doctor diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder and as a hyperactive kid. So they gave him medications and recommended a special diet for him. From here, he would attend the Newtown Primary School, but again, his issues with his bad behaviour resurfaced. At this time, it was noted that Martin had poor academic performance, and he was also the victim of severe bullying by some of the other kids. And this was to the point that he didn't want to attend school anymore. He would tell his parents that he was sick to just try and get out of going. The teachers would see him in the playground or by himself. School just wasn't a very good fit for little Martin Bryant. It would be around the time Martin was 7 years old when his parents Maurice and Carleen would have another child, this time a girl that they would name Lindy. Now throughout the years, Martin actually torments his little sister Lindy, and his behaviour at Newtown Primary was getting more and more out of hand. He would torment vulnerable children, he was aggressive and destructive, and he was observed to revel in the discomfort and failures of other children. And it was at this time too that he was even noted to like tormenting and harassing animals. And academically too, like Martin is failing. Like he's having speech problems and he wasn't progressing at the normal rate. And all the while, like he's bullying kids and they're bullying him. So I guess it's like, I don't know, what goes around comes around in a way. But things get so bad that little Martin eventually gets suspended from the school. Now, this would see Martin admitted to the Hobart Diagnostic Centre. And again, they give him medications and a diet, and they work really hard to try and improve Martin's behavioural issues. And it works to a degree, because a year later, Martin would return to primary school and he was like, I don't know, a changed man, a changed little boy. He was doing a lot better. By 1980, Martin starts the Newtown High School. And it's at this school he's placed in the special education unit, which is like a class for kids that are a little bit slower, like they have learning disabilities. Now, Martin starts out pretty strong, but his behaviour and academics do deteriorate over time. And his father, Maurice, really tries to, like, I don't know, get Martin on the straight and narrow. Like, he spends a lot of time with him, he takes him fishing, he takes him out on the boat, they go scuba diving, they go snorkeling. Like, his father, Maurice, really does a lot of stuff with little Martin. But again, Martin is like having a lot of trouble at school. Like he's just getting bullied and he's got no friends. Like he's feeling socially rejected and isolated. During the holidays, the family would head to the beach house in Carnarvon, where Martin actually has an air rifle. Now I'm guessing maybe his father bought it for him because there's a lot of farm area down there and it's like a fun activity for kids. But Martin, being the little troublemaker that he is, well, let's just say he uses that air rifle in a not so productive kind of way. Martin would be caught shooting the animals in the bush, not killing them but injuring them. But he took it a step further and he started taking pot shots at tourists. Now, an air rifle just shoots pellets, like not actually like real bullets, but it could still like injure somebody. And because Carnarvon is like right next door to the Port Arthur historical site, this is why there's like so much tourism down there. And that whole Port Arthur site, like it was a penal colony, so it was a jail that they used to put convicts in. The convicts were already prisoners and they came to Australia to like build Australia, but if they messed up again, they went to this place. And Port Arthur is like an island on an island of Tasmania, so it was kind of like Alcatraz, I guess, because they called it the inescapable prison because there's like nowhere to go. I'm sure Sean Connery would have something to say about that. So, of course, an area like this is going to attract a lot of tourists, which it does. In Martin's late teens and now back in Hobart, Martin is now age 15 when he leaves school. Now, before he does that, he goes and sees a doctor and they diagnose him as having Asperger's and having a very low IQ. Like, Martin had done IQ tests throughout the years and his IQ sat at 66, which made him in the lowest 20% of 11-year-old kids. So the doctor here basically like deems him to be unemployable and puts him on a disability pension. Now, if you're an Australian, that's like winning the lottery. What a lucky duck. And it's from here his father, Maurice, he would encourage little Martin to, I guess, kind of start his own business, go door to door and do like, I don't know, a not so handy man, like just do odd jobs type things. So, because his father was like a really hard worker. His parents weren't rich, but they did have a good savings sort of thing happening because his dad was a very good saver, but his dad was actually a greenskeeper while his mother worked in sort of catering. But his dad was very tight, so he saved and saved and saved and he invested money. So that sort of put them, I guess, very comfortably in the middle class. So upon his father's advice, Martin starts going door to door, offering his services, and he does like odd jobs for people, mows the lawn, cleans their property, he delivers fruit and vegetables for a time. But it's over the years of doing this that he knocks on the 30 Clara Street door in Newtown. And here he meets an older lady. This woman is in her 50s and she lives there with her very elderly mother. Now, the woman he meets, her name is Helen Mary Elizabeth Harvey. Now, with that many names, you know she's somebody of importance. Now, Helen was a bit of a recluse. She had never had children and she lived a pretty isolated life. But she was extremely wealthy as her family owned the Tattersall lottery now. So she basically like lived off her inheritance. Well, not basically, she did. She lived off her inheritance, which was like the royalties from the Tattersall like lotteries thing, like, and we're not talking like little money getting deposited monthly into an account. We're talking lots of money, like a lot of money. Helen was also an eccentric. So you have an eccentric recluse with a lot of disposable money. So you know this is going to get good. Inside her house, she has like 20 cats and over a dozen dogs and birds and just heaps of different pets. The place is full of animals, and Martin, he loves it. So the pair become very good friends. I'd say almost like a surrogate mother and son sort of relationship starts to take place here. And Helen, she loved to spend money. In fact, she was known at the local car dealers because she'd go down there and just buy a brand new car. Like, we're not talking 1, 2, or even 10. Like, since the 1970s and up until, well, what happens, she purchased over 50 cars. 50 brand new cars. She'd go down there one month at the start of the month and buy one. And then sometimes she'd run low on funds, so she'd take it back and sell it to them at a loss just to get some money to pay some bills for the rest of the month. And then when she got her inheritance money deposited the next month, she'd go back down there and just buy another brand new car. And on one occasion, she bought a brand new car for $28,000, drove it off the lot, backed into a pole, damaged it. Her and Martin decided to fix it themselves, do the dodgy, and they painted it with house paint, and she took it back and got $7,000 for it. So she lost over $21,000 when you factor in like fees and stuff. But that's the sort of money she had. Like, we are talking like reckless spending at its finest. Must be nice. Now, Helen and Martin's relationship would only grow stronger when one day the medical carers for Helen's mother, they would file a complaint with the state because of the state of the property. There's animals everywhere, and the elderly woman that they're caring for, she's got sores all over her body, so they can't have this. So animal welfare come down to the property and they take most of her animals. They only leave her with a handful. And on top of that, the state also takes Helen's elderly mother to hospital because they're like, she's not getting adequate care here. She's living in unsanitary conditions. Now, from here, Helen would spend a lot of time with her mother in the hospital. And Martin and his father, Maurice, they would go around to the Clara Street property and they would start tidying up everything, just sort of prepping it for when Helen returned. It's 1990 when Helen returns to the Clara Street property from the hospital. Her mother had unfortunately passed away and she was devastated and she didn't want to be alone now. So she asked Martin if he would move in. And by this stage, they had known each other for like 6 years. They'd been very close friends for this long. So Martin does move in. Now, Helen also had a farm in a place called Copping. What they ended up doing is Martin and Helen, they both end up moving to the farm because they've got livestock and other pets there. And I guess because it is a farm, like Johnny Law can't say anything about it. Now, the pair would frequently drive into town to get livestock and groceries. Now, this is where Martin does some odd things. Like, Martin is an odd guy. We're going to keep remembering that. I got to keep reminding people that Martin's an odd guy. But Martin was known to just grab the steering wheel while Helen was driving. Because he couldn't drive. He didn't have a driver's license. He'd grab the steering wheel and yank it. And a lot of people thought he was doing it for attention, or he just had a very low impulse control. But in 1992, a tragedy would actually take place. On October 20th, Martin and Helen would be driving down the Arthur Highway when their car steered into oncoming traffic. They had a head-on collision. And Helen, she would be killed, and Martin, he'd be seriously injured. Now, it's only speculation that Martin may have reefed on the steering wheel while she was driving, but he had done it in the past, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. But Martin's story, his statement was to the effect that they had two dogs in the back of the car and they were fighting, and Martin turned around to get them to be quiet, and that was the last thing he remembered. He woke up in hospital. Now, Martin wasn't left unscathed. Like, he had effectively broken his back. And this is where his sister Lindy, they would actually sort of, I guess, rekindle their relationship, because Lindy really comes to the rescue here and like helps look after him in his recovery. So they had a strained relationship from what I found out. And it was probably due to the way Martin actually treated her. But it would be from here that Martin's life would change forever. Helen Harvey had left her entire fortune to Martin. So he is now rich. But unbeknown to Martin's dad Maurice, he's having a battle of his own. He suffered with depression. You see, many years earlier, Maurice and his wife Carleen, they really wanted to buy this place called the Seascape Cottage. It's located in Port Arthur. It's a property right near the water. It's right near the entrance to the historical site. And his father, I guess he saw it as a really good investment opportunity and he really wanted to buy it. But unfortunately, he was getting his affairs in order to do so when David and Sally Martin, this couple, they actually swooped in and got it before him. So it was like first come, first serve. And they would like turn this Seascape property into this thriving bed and breakfast. Like it was a beautiful place. They actually painted it pink, and again, this is where the locals started calling it the Pink Palace. The location was just perfect. So given this fact, Maurice, he saw it, I guess, as a stolen opportunity. Like it was just something that like he just held so much resentment for the Martins, like he couldn't let it go. I don't know, I guess it's like Uncle Rico destroyed his life because had the coach put him in, he would have won the game and he would have played in the NFL. It would be 6 months later, so it would be in June of 1993 when Martin Bryant's inheritance, the one left him by Helen Harvey, it would be transferred to him now. So he's getting all this money, and it was a lot of money. Like we're talking like excess of $30,000 a month. It must have been because Helen spent $28,000 one month on a car at the start of the month. So we know it's in excess of at least $30,000 a month. Now, Martin Bryant he's mentally disabled. Let's just come out and say it. He's not a well man. He's not a well man. So his father actually contacts the trust fund and they put like a committee there and they've got to really like sort of dish out the money very safely to Martin because he is not a smart man. So this is like just another, I guess, checks and balances because he can't manage it himself. Like, let's just be real about it. Martin cannot manage this amount of money himself. So his father's really just looking out for him. But behind the scenes, Maurice was actually enacting another plan. He had secretly transferred his bank account into his wife Carleen's name. And he also transferred the shareholding account that he had been investing into also in his wife's name. So it seems that Maurice, Martin's father, is getting his affairs in order for something. It would be on the 14th of August 1993 when Martin's mother Carleen was speaking to his father Maurice on the phone, and she can't make heads or tails of what Maurice is saying. Like he's just not making any sense when he's talking. He's like going around in circles, I guess. And when she gets off the phone to him, she's concerned. And where he is, he's at the Copping farm, the property there. So Carleen gets in the car and she drives over there. And when she gets there, she finds a note on the door that says, "Call the police." So she does. And it would be 2 days later that police would find his body in the dam. So he had taken himself out. In his personal belongings, a note would be found that stated that he was in deep despair. He had financial worries and he was very disappointed over not being able to purchase Seascape Cottage. Like, this keeps coming back up. Just let it go, man. Move on. But this was like a revolving door for him because like this was years ago and he used to bring it up to Martin all the time when Martin was a kid. Like, man, you know, that Seascape Cottage, bro, we could have had it. Could have been ours. So in less than a year, Martin loses the two closest people to him, Miss Harvey, in a car accident that he was there for, and now his father to a tragic thing here. So these were like the two people that were the closest to Martin. These two people really kept him in line. And I guess it's from this point that Martin, he feels like he just wants to run away. So he starts drinking. But by December, he finds something a little bit more, I guess, better. He starts to travel. He goes to Singapore, Bangkok, London, Sweden, the United States. He goes to like Los Angeles and Miami. He goes to Japan. He goes to Germany, New Zealand, Kuala Lumpur. He goes everywhere. And he does this for like 2 years, right? Like he goes back and forth to these places. Like he just doesn't go once. You know, like someone like me would save up and go on like a big trip and it would be like once. He does this for 2 years and he's periodically just flying back to Australia, staying for a couple of weeks and going, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Miami. And he just gets on a plane and just goes. Like, man, rich people, bro, I'm telling you. But it gets to the point where the committee overseeing the money being sent to Martin, they tell him, you're going to have to slow down now. Like, this is getting way out of hand. It's getting way too expensive. At the back end of 1995, they put the kibosh on him traveling overseas. He can still go interstate. And by this time, 27-year-old Martin, he's got a 16-year-old girlfriend who they named Mary. That wasn't a real name, Mary, but the media named her Mary because of her age. But Mary, she had like been dating Martin, and Martin like pulled out all the stops. He took on like a lot of like interstate trips, like to Queensland and Brisbane and Perth and places like that. And she'll quite famously say at their first date, he took her to Sydney and they were at a restaurant and he was pretending to read the Age newspaper. He was like sitting there acting like a real big shot low. And she's just looking at him, knowing that he probably doesn't know how to read very good, but he's just sitting there like this, and she played along with it to make him feel better about himself. But it would also be during their relationship that Martin, he'd bought this boat, like this very expensive boat, because remember, he's got money. And he took the boat out, but not enough petrol to run the boat. So the boat ends up running out of fuel, and they're out sort of, not in the middle of the ocean, but they're out sort of at sea a little bit. But he starts crying because he thinks they're going to die. And she's there like telling him to calm down, and he's like apologizing to her. We're gonna die out here. And anyway, another boat sees them and rescues them, like tows them back to port. He would ask this chick to marry him, and she respectfully declined. She said no. You know, and although she said Martin was really nice, he was super wealthy, he was also really dumb. That was like the excuse she gave. Like, the guy was a dummy. But there was like also other odd things she noticed about him. Like, he had a collection of over 200 dolls, and he really loved the movie Child's Play. Like, he'd always go on and on about Chucky. That's the main character. He'd talk about how, man, he comes back to life and he wants to kill this kid because if he kills this kid, he's going to live forever. But then he just murders like a whole bunch of people. And he'd quote the classic line from there, like, don't F with the Chuck. And she said when he'd do that, like, he'd get all excited. Yeah, I think he was really cool, but she kind of saw him as a dork. But there was also another thing that he brought back from Europe, which were these weird sex tapes that involved animals. Now, I remember the 90s. The internet was pretty new. Say less, bro. Say less. So Mary and Martin had a relationship for about 8 months when she decided to end it. Now, this is early 1996, and Martin decides to place an ad in the newspaper because he's looking for a helper around the house at Clara Street, and also someone that's going to help with the farm. And a 20-year-old woman named Petra Wilmont, she answers that ad. Now, Petra and Martin would very quickly become a couple. She would stay at Martin's house at Clara Street on the weekends, but she would return to her parents' place during the week. It would be on April 15th when Martin and Petra would go into town, and they'd visit the store Maya. And it would be here, Martin was actually looking to buy this sports bag, but he needed it to be a very specific size. So he even had a tape measure out, and he's measuring up different bags, and he ends up settling on this Prince sports bag. Now, unbeknown to Petra, Martin, he had a few secrets. And for added context, because Petra always gets brought up in the conspiracy circles, she only dated Martin for a few weeks. She didn't know Martin Bryant very long. So her opinions on how nice he was, I don't think are super relevant. I just don't. She knew him not very long. They'd only just, like, she always gets brought up. They never bring up the 16-year-old who dated him for 8 months, who can shed more light on his psyche because they were together for 8 months. But nonetheless, Martin Bryant had this collection that he'd been building that nobody knew about, that he had hidden in an upright piano. There was a hollowed out part in the upright piano. He had some things stashed behind there. You see, for the past several years, Martin had been buying firearms. Now, technically, you could legally buy them back then, but it was illegal for him because he didn't have a gun license. Like, he didn't have a car license either, and that didn't stop him driving. But the laws for guns in Australia back then were super relaxed. But this collection of guns that he'd been stockpiling, there was a total of 6 to 8. I couldn't find exactly the number, but it was between 6 and 8, and he had an AR-10, which most notably, he bought the AR-10 only 2 months after his father's passing. I find that very interesting, but it would be over these next few years he'd buy an AR-15, a semi-automatic shotgun, a pump-action shotgun, and a military-style SLR, which is just a self-loading rifle. That was a couple of the guns that he bought. Now, he bought some of these guns at the local gun shop where the dude actually knew him, so didn't ask him for his license, just assumed that he had one. And he also bought them out of the local paper too, the Mercury. That's where he was buying these guns. And he also purchased thousands of rounds of ammunition, like thousands of them. And again, he had all this stuff hidden in the back part of an upright piano, so Petra, she never sees it. But again, she hasn't known him that long. Like, why do we keep talking about Petra Wilmot? On Saturday, the 27th of April, Petra and Martin, they go to Martin's mother's house for dinner. Now, Petra notices that Martin is drinking a little bit more than he normally does, and he's getting very talkative, which he was somewhat talkative, but not this much. And he's, I guess, play acting aggressive in a way. It wasn't startling. I mean, it was more like in hindsight, well, this happened type thing. Like, it wasn't at the time she was like, oh God, you know. But after this, Martin and Petra, they would go to a nightclub because Petra's cousin was supposed to be there, but he never turned up. And after the nightclub, they just went home. But this is where it gets super interesting because Martin, he actually sets his alarm for 6 a.m., which was very unusual. He didn't have a job. So the alarm goes off and Petra and Martin get up together and actually shower together. Now, this is the day, it's Sunday, so Petra is going to be heading home. And she does. She leaves the house at around 8 a.m. Now, Martin has access to two cars. One is a Honda Civic that he got busted driving a couple of years before. The other car he had was this yellow Volvo 240 GL. And he had purchased that September the year before, and he had this big surfboard on the roof of it. So let's just say it stands out. At 9:40 a.m, Martin loads the car up, loads this Volvo up. He's taking the Volvo and he's got the Prince bag, and inside the Prince bag there are 3 rifles, and he's got a semi-automatic shotgun and loads of ammunition. He's also got 2 sets of handcuffs, a rope, a hunting knife, and he's got a couple of petrol containers. I think he had about 3 petrol containers that were empty at this stage. But they're not going to be for long. Now, Martin is driving from Hobart to Port Arthur, which again is about an hour and a half, but it does take him really long to get there because he makes all these stops. So at 10:30, he stops at the news agency where he buys a cigarette lighter. Now, this news agent knew Martin quite well. In fact, he used to always see Martin very early in the morning because Martin Bryant didn't have a license. So he'd always see him around 6 a.m. So he did get up early. And whenever he came in, he was also always jovially talking and he'd say hello and all that. On this occasion, though, he didn't. Barely looked at him. He just bought the lighter and left. Now, from here, Martin drives to Sorel, which he goes into a supermarket and buys a bottle of tomato sauce for some weird reason. And the reason this is memorable for the cashier or the owner is because Martin is carrying this very large bag and the owner is watching him because he's worried he's going to steal some things. And then when he gets his tomato sauce, he pays for it in change, in 5 and 10 cent pieces, which it's so strange. It's like he's trying to get rid of his change, I guess. Now, from here, he heads further south towards Port Arthur, where he stops at a petrol station in Forset. Now, it's around 11 a.m. And the interaction here is memorable because he buys a coffee, but he asks the guy not to boil the jug all the way. It's because he said it was too hot. And again, he pays for it in 5 and 10 cent pieces. But what makes it super memorable is he tells them that he's going surfing at Roaring Beach. Now, you got to remember, like, these are beachside suburbs, so most people surf there. Or a lot do. And they know it's not a good day for surfing, like it's completely flat. So the fact that he's cruising around with a surfboard on the roof and now he's telling people that he's going surfing, he's standing out because it's not the day for it. It'd be like if you live in America and you live in the snow area and it's summer and there's no snow and you see someone driving around with like snowboard stuff on the roof going, I'm going skiing. Like, you'd be like, what? Now, given the fact that this car is so recognizable, again, I can't stress it enough, he is actually spotted at Eagle Hawk Neck. And now that's another tourist location. So it was believed that he went there and was scoping out the scene, but I don't believe there was a lot of people in the area. So from here, he heads further south to another petrol station at Tirana, where he buys 15 litres of fuel for his jerry cans. Now, Martin's only 10 minutes away from Port Arthur, from these historical sites. This is where the story really kicks up a gear. So he's driving there, but he decides to turn into the very long driveway of the Seascape Cottage. He drives down its very long driveway to the bottom, where he turns his car around and he backs it up to the front door. It's roughly 11:30 a.m. when Martin Bryant gets out of his car and he walks through the doors of the Pink Palace, where David and Sally Martin are inside alone doing chores. Now, we know they're alone because it was about 10 or 15 minutes earlier when the last guest had left the house for the day. What Martin does from here is largely uncertain, but what we know is that Sally Martin had been bludgeoned to death and shot, while David, he'd been gagged, stabbed and shot. So it's probably safe to say that Martin may have handcuffed them. He may very well have handcuffed them. He killed David first and he bludgeoned Sally before shooting her just to make sure she was dead. But from all reports, the initial bludgeoning would have killed her. Now, these shots were heard by two residents, but one in particular I found very interesting because he was like a local farmer, and every time shots were fired, he'd get blamed for it because people were like, he's killing seals again. So the reason it's so notable to him, because I think he was fishing at the time. He heard the shots. He was like, here we go. I'm going to get the blame for that. Now, it's as Martin is leaving the building, so it's roughly 12:30, when that car driven by the Masons comes down and they have that interaction. And this is where Martin says that his parents aren't home. So he's going off the pretense that his parents actually own this cottage, which is super interesting and super important. It would be after this awkward exchange that the Masons just got back in their car and they drove off. That was the start of this whole story. Now, it would be not long after that local residents noticed the Volvo with the surfboard on the roof, remember, it's sticking out like dog's balls, being driven towards the Port Arthur township. Now, from here, Martin encounters a broken down car, sort of just around the bend of where the Seascape Cottage was. And there's two occupants in it. So Martin pulls up and he's like jovially talking to them. And they said, you going surfing? He says, no, I'm going to the Isle of the Dead to get rid of some wasps. Now, he would call, I believe it was Japanese tourist wasps. It was like this thing that he did. It was like an inside joke, I guess, to him and people that knew him. So they didn't really know what he was talking about. But after this interaction, Martin gets back in his car and he actually drives past the historical site. And he goes to Mr. and Mrs. Roger Lana's farm. Now, he knew the Lanas like years ago because his parents actually owned a holiday place nearby. But it gets a little bit more interesting because Roger would be standing out the front talking to Martin. And Martin would say that he was sort of just in the area and he was looking to buy the Martin's property, the Seascape. He actually says that. But he also asked to see Mrs. Lana. Now, there's an interesting history there because after Martin's father's death, Martin ran into Mrs. Lana in Newtown, which is in Hobart. So again, it's an hour and a half away. And after that, he started making nuisance phone calls to her. So he started just ringing her up. I don't know what he was saying, but whatever it was enough that she went to the police to get him to stop. So he wants to see her, and he's just killed the Martins. Now, Roger says, yeah, that's fine. I'll come upstairs with you. And it's at that point that Martin says, you know what? I've actually got to go to Nubian. I'll come back later. And he gets in his car and he drives off. So, close encounter. It would be around 1:15 when Martin would get into the historical site. He actually had to sit in traffic for a bit because it was a very busy day and there was a toll booth. So it took him like 15 minutes to get up to the toll booth. I guess he gets through the gate around about 1:30. And initially he goes and parks his car at the water's edge. But there's like a parking lot attendant who goes down there and says, hey, you can't park here. This is reserved for people with camper vans and stuff, people with bigger vehicles. And Martin gets very angry with this guy. And the guy's like, hey, listen, man, I'm just doing my job. Because it was so busy down there, the parking lot was pretty full. So they did make Martin move, and Martin would drive his car further up to the back of the parking lot, but he would wait for this parking lot attendant to actually leave, and then he'd just go back down to where he was at the water's edge, park his car, get out, grab his blue bag, and he would walk into this cafe called Broad Arrow. This is where it all pretty much starts to go downhill from here. If you've hung on this this long. It is a long story, guys. So at this stage, there is about 60 people inside this cafe when Martin Bryant walks in. He's got his big blue bag. He goes up to the cafeteria, the food area, and he orders a giant plate of food. Like, he really stacks it on there because people noticed it. And he gets a can of drink and he walks outside and he goes and sits on the balcony. Now, as he's going out, someone holds the door for him because he's got a big bag. He's carrying a tray with a plate of food and a drink on it. So he's carrying his tray, he's got his bag, and he's walking towards the balcony door. Someone opens it, allows him to go out, and he finds a table and he sits down at it. As he sits down, he loudly says, "There are a lot of wasps around today." At which people noticed that because they started looking around thinking, no, there isn't. Now, Martin would finish his giant plate of food and he was out there actually mumbling to himself and incoherently, people said, and he even swore. He was saying effing this about the parking lot attendant who'll park where he wants. And so people straight away thought, this guy's odd, man. But he finishes his food, picks up his tray, and he goes to go back inside. And again, someone holds the door for him. So he goes in and he goes up to the cafeteria area, puts his tray down. Then he walks to the end of it and he puts his bag up on the bench and he stops and he stands there. It's at this point that a man named Michael Sargent, he's sitting at a nearby table. He can directly see Martin. He's just there. And his girlfriend, Kate Scott, is in front of him. She has her back to Martin Bryant. But Michael sees Martin like staring at these two Asian tourists. Like he's just giving them a dirty look. And Michael, he stares directly back at Martin, like I guess in a way of letting him know that what he was doing was super inappropriate. And Martin sees Michael looking at him, like they make eye contact briefly. And then Michael, he turns back to his food and the people he's at the table with when he hears two gunshots ring out, and he quickly looks up to see Martin Bryant standing there. He'd just shot two Malaysian tourists point blank. He gets Su Leng in the back of the head here and he hits Mo Leng in the neck. In fact, like when Mo Leng got killed, he was still holding the knife like he was eating his food with. Like they found him like that, and these two were like slumped up against the window on the wall just there. And from here, Martin turns his sights on Michael, the guy who was like staring at him a moment ago, letting him know that his actions of staring at these tourists were wrong. And Martin fires the weapon at him, but Michael leans forward like that and it grazes the top of his head. Meanwhile, Michael hits the deck. His girlfriend, Kate Scott, she gets hit in the back of the head. She doesn't even see it coming and she's killed instantly. It would be from here that Martin would start walking around the cafe, just shooting people at random, and he is laughing while he's doing it. Now, most of these shots were done at point blank range, and they know that because of the gunpowder burn that was found on the victims, particularly the ones around the neck and stuff. He would go up and right near their neck and he'd fire directly into it, or he'd fire directly into their back, and it had a burn pattern around where the gunshot wound was. So most of his victims were hit at point blank range. These weren't like shots from any sort of distance. Now, inside the cafe, there is mass confusion and disbelief because this is a historical site. So there are some people who, I guess, are convincing themselves this may be a reenactment of something, because that did happen at some historical sites. So people are somewhat confused. And this is like, people do, I guess, in that situation, a weird stuff. Like one man turns around and he yells, "That's not very funny," and then he gets shot dead. Another one stands up yelling, "No, not here," and then he gets gunned down. I mean, when you're in that situation, I guess you just don't know what to do. Your brain is just like flipping over inside its skull. But it's here people are starting to scramble underneath tables and they're trying to get chairs in front of him. Martin's just going around and he's just emptying the magazine. And at one point, he changes mags, and this man who was hiding under the table, for some reason, when there was a lull in the fire, believed that he'd gone. He said, "I think he's gone." And witnesses said they see him stand up and then he starts going, "No, no, no, no," before he gets gunned down, and he is dropped and he is dead. From here, Martin moves outside the cafe. Now, inside the cafe, he had killed 20 people and injured more than a dozen. There's blood and bodies everywhere. Outside, he kills another 4 people on the veranda before he's heading into the car park area. Now, it's here where he goes through the boot of his car and he retrieves the SLR. And he is firing at people who are running up into the bushes. They're hiding behind cars. He's firing at them. He doesn't really have a very good kill rate when he's out here because he's got to hit people at range. Like, he was much better when they were right in front of him. It was much easier. But he starts going around the buses. Now, from here, Martin encounters a man named Neville Quinn. Now, Neville and Martin make eye contact, and straight away, Neville just books it. He's running off between these buses, and Martin fires a shot at him, which whizzes past his head. Now, Neville tries to hide behind the buses. Like, he's going one side to the other like that, trying to, like, if Martin's going down that side, I want to go down this one, sort of thing. So Martin comes around the outside, so Neville runs and he gets onto the bus and he goes to the back and tries to hide behind the seat. Now, Martin sees him and follows him onto the bus and heads to the back. And Martin stands directly over Neville and he says, "No one gets away from me," before shooting him in the neck. Now, Neville survived this. However, Neville's wife didn't. Neville's wife was outside at the back of the bus. She'd been hit in the thigh and that had paralysed her to a degree she couldn't move. And she was there for about 10 minutes before Martin had made his way back around, seen her still alive, and then put one in her chest. So Neville's wife did not make it. From here, he gets in his car and he starts heading up Jetty Road towards the exit. Now, this is one of the saddest parts of this story because there's a woman named Nanette Macaque, and she's there with her 2 little daughters, 3-year-old Madeline and 6-year-old Alana. Now, they heard the commotion and they stayed up on the hill. They didn't go any further down. But her husband, the kid's father, he actually wasn't there on the day. He was playing golf somewhere else. So this must be a tough one to live with. Now, as Martin is driving up the road, he's waving at Nanette, and Nanette believes that Martin in this yellow Volvo is there to help them. So she actually turns to 3-year-old Madeline. She's worried at this point. She turns to her and says, "We are now safe, Pumpkin." And she walks over towards Martin Bryant's Volvo. From here, Martin gets out with his gun and gets her to kneel down, where he executes her. He shoots 3-year-old Madeline. Now, the 6-year-old Alana, she sees this and she runs off into the woods where Martin Bryant follows her and he shoots her at close range. Again, we know this because of the gunpowder burns. So he kills this mother and 2 little children. Like, you're a scumbag. Like, let's just be honest about it. Now, further up the road, there are 2 cars that had heard the commotion and are also waved down by an elderly man who told them, "Hey, there's someone down there shooting." So these 2 cars, they ended up backing up towards the toll booth. Now, there was a gold BMW that blocked the exit. I'm not sure why they blocked the exit. Maybe they thought they were helping if they contained it all in this one area. Now, the occupants of the other car, it was a Mr. and Mrs. Buckley, they had actually seen Martin Bryant shoot Mrs. Macaque and her kids. They seen it and they started running up the road. They ditched the car. I mean, they just were panic stations. They started legging it up the road, where another car coming down, they flagged them down and said, "We got to get out of here." And they jumped in that car and they drove off. They ended up going to the service station because they're like, there's someone, I just seen this guy murder people. We need to get out of here. Don't go down there. So they go further up the road. They stop there and they start trying to flag people down to try and stop them from going in there because people are still turning into the historical site. You know, Martin Bryant is like executing people down there. Now, the 4 occupants of this gold BMW, I'm guessing didn't see Martin Bryant shoot Mrs. Macaque and the kids because they stayed behind. In fact, it was a guy named Ken Nixon. It was his car and his wife Mary Rose, and they were there with 2 friends that were visiting from Switzerland, a man named Robert and Helen Salzman. Now, I'm guessing they just never seen Martin do that. For whatever reason, they stayed behind, but the 2 men are out of the car and the 2 women are seating in the car when Martin drives up to them. An argument actually breaks out between Martin and I believe it was Robert Salzman, and Martin got out of his car with the rifle and just shot Mr. Salzman. Now, another car coming down the road sees that and they describe it as if, like, when Robert was hit in the chest, it was like his whole chest caved in. And then from here, Ken Nixon walks around to see what's going on. He gets killed. And then Martin goes up to the gold BMW, kills the 2 women in it, pulls them out, jumps in the BMW and drives off. Like, he's like playing real life Grand Theft Auto at this point. It's about 2 p.m, so 20 minutes after he'd started opening fire at these people when Martin Bryant is leaving the historical site at Port Arthur in this stolen gold BMW. Now, he comes to a petrol station where he blocks in a Toyota Corolla. Now, inside this Corolla is a woman named Zoe Hall and her boyfriend Glenn Pierce. Now, Martin kidnaps Glenn Pierce and puts him in the boot of this stolen BMW, and then he shoots Zoe, who's sitting in the car. Like, she's now dead in the car. From here, he speeds off up Arthur Highway. Like, he is like hitting some mad speeds, and he comes to a stop at the top of the driveway of the Seascape Cottage. Now, from here, he's got the AR-15 and he just starts shooting at cars that are driving past. He shoots at like 6 or 7 of them, injuring the people inside. He doesn't kill anybody, but they get injured by fragments from the bullets, from the glass. He then jumps back in his BMW and he drives down to the cottage where he gets Glenn Pierce out of the boot and takes him inside. Now, he handcuffs Glenn with one set of handcuffs behind his back. With another set of handcuffs, he goes through the middle and he attaches him to a wall or something so he can't go anywhere. Then Martin goes outside and with one of the petrol cans, he tips it all through the BMW and sets it alight. So this thing like explodes. And not before too long, the police show up and they start blocking off the roads so nobody can go near the site. They're actually cordoning off the area and they've called in tactical response. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time for them to actually get there though. So by this stage, more police are arriving to the scene and Martin Bryant is just shooting at them from out the window. He's taking shots at them. They're ducking down. Like, these are like full automatic type assault rifles. It would be from here several phone calls would be made and received. One was from a news reporter who called the Seascape Cottage and she spoke to Martin, who answered the phone and gave his name as Jamie. Another call that Martin Bryant made was to the police station where he spoke to the girlfriend of one of the officers that was there. And he was like tormenting her in a way. And again, he called himself Jamie, but he was tormenting her in a way saying, do you know where your boyfriend is? So he obviously knew these people to a degree. The other calls were from like negotiators trying to like bring this siege to an end because Martin had told them that if they came near the place, he was going to kill the hostages. So he was, I guess, insinuating the Martins were still alive. So as this siege has gone into the night and early next morning, Martin had fired about 150 rounds at the police during this entire time. It would be just before 8 a.m. when officers noticed the top floors of the house, the windows were starting to pour fire out and they could see flames. Next thing they know, the entire house is engulfed and a tactical officer at the back of the property notices Martin running out with his back all on fire and he jumps into the lake. And from here, Martin gets out of the water and he's naked and he's laying on the ground. The officer goes over there. They arrest him and they rush him off to hospital. It's while in hospital recovering that the police show up and Inspector Ross Payne would notify Martin that he was being charged with the murder of Kate Scott. Now, Kate Scott, if you remember, was the woman shot after the Malaysian couple was shot that was sitting at the table. It was her boyfriend, Michael Sargent, who was looking at Martin. In the initial police interview several days later at the police station, Martin Bryant would deny everything, except for the fact that he did steal the gold BMW. He said he did that, and he did kidnap Glenn Pierce. And when they asked him why he kidnapped Glenn Pierce, he said he thought he'd get in less trouble for stealing the BMW if he kidnapped somebody. So that totally makes a lot of sense. And it was actually determined that Glenn Pierce was more than likely killed just after they entered the house because he was shot multiple times and there was no smoke inhalation in his lungs. But during this police interview, Martin Bryant did trip up several times. When asked about the Seascape Cottage, the owners, the Martins, he referred to them in past tense. And we all know what that means, don't we, true crimers, when you're referring to people in past tense. It's because you know they're not alive anymore. He would also gleefully ask about how many people were killed on the day, and he also wanted to see crime scene pictures. Like, he seemed to be getting off on this. I mean, if you watch the interview or you at least read the transcript, you can tell Martin Bryant is really enjoying this whole interaction with the cops. On November 22nd, 1996, so 7 months after the Port Arthur Massacre, Martin John Bryant would be convicted and sentenced to 35 life sentences and rubber stamped as to never to be released. Now the conspiracy. Oh, God. So one of the biggest ones is that there were multiple shooters. And the reason people think that is because when he got in the car park and was firing, people were getting confused. They didn't know where the shots were coming from. So the way sound travels is actually, particularly loud sounds like that, they bounce off hard surfaces. So if you're at the back of the car park and he fires around and the sound bounces off the nearby vehicle, it can actually sound like it's coming from over there and not in front of you. So I think that's why there were some people that thought that there was more than one shooter. Another thing, people are like, well, why did people have cameras there? They filmed it. It's a tourist site. Yeah. The second one that you hear is that it wasn't him. Now, most people there identified Martin Bryant as the shooter, but some did say that it didn't look like him. Now, I think the reason for that is that when we have something extremely traumatic like this, some survivors, they have like a memory suppression thing go on. And it's where their brain quite literally shuts down. It's like this, it's a way of protecting itself. And what can also happen here is that people can, I guess unintentionally, they're not lying, but they can omit and alter details of the events that they were involved in when something this traumatic happens. Now, you got to remember, people saw loved ones getting killed in front of them, the survivors, and some of them were shot themselves. It was an extremely traumatic incident. So I think there were some people that probably suffered from that as well, and they looked at pictures and they just didn't recognize him. But most people there, the large majority of them said, that's the guy. That's Martin Bryant. He was the guy that shot me. Oh, he was the guy that was shooting at people. Plus, there's footage of him. The third one, and another big one people bring up, is the money. What happened to Martin Bryant's inheritance? Well, the Tasmanian government, they actually specifically changed to the legislation to enable the victims of him to sue him and his estate. So that's where the money went. They actually did something good with it. They allowed his victims to sue the estate. So they got the money. Why wasn't there a coronial inquest? The government must be covering it up. The government, the state government. The whole thing was extremely traumatic, not only for the people that were there that were injured or lost loved ones, not even the people that witnessed it. The whole area was affected by this. It was a huge deal. And Martin Bryant, he had pled guilty, which saved everybody this drawn-out trial, which everybody was super happy about because they didn't want to relive this, because the aftermath for the people that were there, not only the physical and mental injuries that these people had to carry for the rest of their lives, but some of them checked out early. They had relationship breakdowns, they had anger issues. It affected so many people afterwards. So the reason I don't think they did a coronial inquest is it was viewed as being more destructive than helpful, because they're going to have to re-interview everybody. And because of the confusion on the day, the Crown knows that the case that they presented may not 100% be how it went down, because they're going off eyewitness testimony that in some parts contradicts other people's, because if 10 people see one thing, you get 10 different responses as to what happened. So they just didn't see a point in revisiting it like that. And I got to be honest, I sort of agree. And also, you know, you had the fact that tourists were murdered in Australia from other countries. It was sort of, you know, it's a huge embarrassment for the country. It's a huge shame. And lastly, this is an oldie but a goodie. The government did it to take our guns away. You would have to believe that a mentally ill person with access to firearms is not capable of killing people. You would have to believe that. Does anyone actually believe that? Anyone, like really? But it would be our Prime Minister, John Howard. He would actually, he was the one that took the guns away. Well, the high-powered ones, anyway. He did a buyback scheme. I knew a lot of older people who were spewing. Now, I mean, I'm glad in a way. Like, I mean, I'd love to own guns, don't get me wrong. I mean, I could own guns. I could go and get a firearms permit and a long arms license, and I could own guns. I mean, I can't own machine guns like an AR-15, but I could own like a cool rifle, and I can own like a Beretta pistol and stuff like that. Like, you can own guns. You've got to be a member of a club. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, I'm not going to tell Americans how to live. Like, that. If I lived in Texas, I'd have machine guns for sure. Like, I'm not even going to lie. I'm not even going to pretend that wouldn't be the case, because I would. But the fact is, Martin Bryant, he acted alone. It was very relaxed gun laws that enabled him to basically carry this out. and stockpile weapons. He was upset that he was shunned by people, and he felt he deserved better. And I guess to a degree, maybe he did in that respect. But he also had a level of entitlement, and he acted inappropriately at times. So this is why people really, didn't want to sort of be around him. And the way he killed all these people at very close range, you didn't need to be an expert marksman. So conspiracy theorists running around with, how did he manage to kill all these people? Well, when you're this close to somebody, it's not that hard. But you look at the first people he kills, the Martins. We know why he did that. I mean, he bought the rifle 2 months after his father's death, who blamed the Martins for not being able to buy that property. So Martin Bryant really was pissed off at the owners of the Seascape Cottage. So that's why he went there with the intention of murdering them and burning the place down. When he walked out and he encountered the Masons who wanted to rent a room, he told them that his parents weren't there. I think that says a lot about his mind frame. From here, he went to the Lana's place because he wanted to get Miss Lana. I believe she got really lucky. I think he wanted to take her out because he was pissed that she got Johnny Law on him and told him, listen, bro, you need to stop harassing this woman. So I think he wanted to go there and he wanted to get her as well. Like, this guy held a grudge, big time. And you also got to take into account that he loved traveling at this point too, and the committee overseeing his inheritance fund, they stopped him. They put the kibosh on it in early 1996. And he also had a 16-year-old girlfriend that left him that he wanted to marry. And he'd only been with Petra Wilmot for a couple of weeks. So she was like a rebound relationship at that point. And everybody knows you're not super happy in rebound relationships. So I just don't buy into the conspiracy theories. I'm sorry, I just don't. Martin Bryant was a very sick man who enjoyed killing people. I mean, he's walking around a cafe just smiling, loving it. He has no remorse for it. And this Port Arthur massacre actually held the record for 15 years as being the most deadly mass shooting. Like, it ended up getting beaten by that Norway one on the island. So yeah, I don't buy into the conspiracy. I think a lot of this is very easy to piece together and, have a full understanding of it. Hold on. Well, do I get a seat at the Illuminati table now?
Of course.
Okay, good. All right. Let me convince these suckers Martin Bryant did it, and I'll get back to you later. Edit out this part of the video. So that is the Martin Bryant story, the Port Arthur Massacre. If you like the video, like the video. If you didn't, give it a down thumb. Tell me I suck. But as always, people, you stay safe out there in internet land.